I woke to the sound of floorboards stretching in the morning heat, like the old farmhouse was reminding me it was still alive. The sunlight crept through the seams in the curtains. Those yellowed things Ruth had stitched back when we were both young enough to think handmade meant something. The room still smelled faintly of cedar and the lilac perfume she used to dab behind her ears. My name is Charles E. Wilcox. I'm 82 years old, and I live alone in the farmhouse I built with Ruth in 1964, just outside of Hamilton, Missouri. It's been 15 years since she passed, but there are days I still expect to hear her in the kitchen, humming and rattling through the spice cabinet like she always did. I sat on the edge of the bed, catching my breath. My knees weren't what they used to be, but they still carried me down the hall and into the kitchen. The wallpaper was peeling in one corner. Ruth would have fussed over that, and the coffee maker let out a strangled hiss as it tried to do its job. It worked, eventually. Most things do, if you give them time. By 9, I heard Wyatt's old pickup coming up the gravel drive. I looked out the front window and saw him stepping out with a flat of seedlings and that quiet determination he always had. 19, going on 40, my grandson. The only one in the family who didn't treat me like a museum exhibit. "Morning, Grandpa," he said, shutting the truck door with his hip. "Brought some late tomatoes and 2 kinds of peppers. Figured we could get them in the ground before it gets too hot." I nodded and followed him out to the garden. The soil was dry but workable. Ruth's old raised beds were still holding their shape, more or less. Wyatt knelt down and got to work without needing instruction. Watching him there, brushing hair from his eyes with the back of his wrist, it struck me how much of Ruth was in him. Not his face, he had his mother's narrow nose and his dad's awkward height, but in the way he moved, patient and sure. Ruth had always said, a garden told you everything about a person. If that was true, Wyatt was worth knowing. I sat on the old bench under the pear tree, letting the sun warm my knees. The breeze carried the faint smell of cut grass and compost. It reminded me of a time when Ruth and I used to spend Sundays out here, pulling weeds and teasing each other about who'd found more grubs. "Don't overwater the eggplants," I said, pointing with my cane. "They'll sulk if their feet get too wet." Wyatt smirked but nodded. "Noted." We worked like that for a while, the silence between us easy, not the strained kind that filled the house when Karen came around. Speak of the devil. I heard the sharp crunch of tires on gravel, too fast for someone just visiting. A moment later, Karen's silver Lexus rolled to a stop beside the house. She stepped out wearing a pressed blazer and heels, like she'd come straight from court, even though it was Saturday. "I brought lunch," she called out, holding up a brown paper bag from that overpriced deli in town. Wyatt glanced at me, then kept working. I grunted and got to my feet. Karen kissed my cheek too quickly and handed me the bag. "Turkey on rye, doctor's orders, right?" "Thanks," I said, without warmth. She glanced around the garden. "Didn't think you'd still be out here messing with dirt." "Wyatt, this place is a lot for him to manage, don't you think?" Wyatt didn't answer, just kept planting. I saw the way her eyes moved, not with affection, but calculation. She wasn't admiring the house. She was assessing it, studying the roofline, measuring the yard, not looking back, looking forward. "Let's eat inside," she said. But I already knew lunch came with strings. Karen set the paper bag on the kitchen counter like it was a peace offering. "It's from Margot's downtown," she said, pulling out 2 sandwiches and a side of pasta salad in a plastic tub. "I remembered you liked the rye." I didn't correct her. I hated their rye. Always had. Ruth used to say it tasted like wallpaper paste. Wyatt came in behind us, dirt still on his knees, wiping his hands on a rag from his back pocket. He gave Karen a nod and didn't say much else, just washed up at the sink while she talked about parking and how the whole town was going downhill since the co-op closed. We sat at the table. Karen crossed her legs and smoothed her skirt, unwrapping her sandwich with delicate fingers. "Dad," she said between bites, "have you thought more about what we talked about last month?" I didn't look up. "Which part?" She exhaled gently, the kind of breath people take when they think they're being patient. "About maybe downsizing, moving somewhere with medical staff on hand. Somewhere you don't have to worry about—" She waved a hand toward the back window. "All that land." Wyatt gave me a quick glance, chewing slow. "I'm fine right here," I said, picking the tomato off my sandwich. "I've got everything I need." "Come on, Dad." Karen smiled too wide. "You don't even have central air." "I've got windows that open. Works just the same." "You're being stubborn." "No," I said, folding my napkin. "I'm being rooted." Karen laughed like I'd said something charming. Well, I just worry, you know. What if something happens? You could fall. What if you need help in the middle of the night? I've got Wyatt helping out, I said, nodding toward him. Wyatt looked up from his plate. I check on him every couple days. He's not alone. Karen's smile didn't falter, but her eyes narrowed just a bit. You're still in school, Wyatt. You'll get busy. Life picks up speed. That's just how it is. Wyatt looked away. Karen leaned in slightly. Aaron and I have been talking. If you're not ready to move into a facility, maybe we could come stay here for a while. You know, just to help manage things. I sat back. The plastic tub of pasta clicked softly as I set down my fork. That's kind of you, I said, but I'm managing things just fine. It's just an idea, she said lightly. You know this house won't last forever. I didn't answer. I stood slowly, joints groaning louder than the floorboards. Doctor says I should rest after lunch, I said, even though he hadn't said any such thing. Take it easy. Karen looked disappointed, but she nodded. Of course. I left them at the table and made my way down the hall. I sat in my recliner and closed my eyes, but I didn't sleep. I listened. Footsteps moved through the house, not wandering, not meandering, measured, counting doors, opening closets, not remembering, calculating. The shortness of breath came on fast. 1 minute I was tying up tomato vines, the next I was leaning on the garden post, dizzy and coughing like a man twice my age. Wyatt was inside getting lemonade when it hit, and by the time he came back out, I was half sitting on the dirt, trying to wave him off but not quite managing to stand on my own. He didn't say a word, just helped me into the kitchen, grabbed my oxygen tank from the closet, something Dr. Sanford had given me just in case, and dialed for help. I remember flashes of the ambulance, the ceiling lights in the ER, the sterile smell of everything. But what I remember most is Dr. Sanford's face, tired, calm, and too familiar. It's advanced pulmonary fibrosis, Charles, he said, when we sat alone in the consult room the next day. It's been progressing, more than you let on. I figured, I said quietly. I just didn't feel like hearing it out loud. He looked at me the way old friends do, because that's what we were in a way. He'd treated Ruth before she passed, delivered Karen even. I'll schedule some scans, he said, and we'll get you a visiting nurse, someone steady, twice a week at least, no argument. I didn't argue. 2 days later, Lorraine Briggs showed up on my porch with a leather satchel and sensible shoes. She looked around 50, maybe a little more, broad-shouldered, quiet, eyes like slate, and a handshake that didn't hesitate. You Charles? She asked, already halfway through the screen door. I suppose I still am, she smirked. Well, I'm Lorraine. I'm here Mondays and Thursdays. I bring my own gloves and don't tolerate pity. You good with that? I nodded. The next hour was all blood pressure checks and breathing tests. No nonsense, no fuss. She moved around the kitchen like she'd been in it 100 times. When she was done, she sat across from me, filled out her chart, and asked if I was still eating red meat. Only when I forget I'm not supposed to, I said. She raised an eyebrow. That's fine. I'm not the food police. I liked her then. Not because she was nice, she wasn't, not really, but because she saw me like a man, not a patient, like someone with a name and a past, not just numbers on a chart. She was packing up when the door opened, and in walked Karen, arms full of pharmacy bags and a box of some organic meal kit. I stopped by because I thought... She froze when she saw Lorraine. Who are you? Lorraine didn't flinch. Lorraine Briggs, home care nurse, twice a week. You must be the daughter. Karen blinked, then looked at me. Why didn't you tell me about this? I didn't think it was your business, I said. He needs pulmonary support and reduced stress, Lorraine added plainly, preferably in that order. Karen's mouth opened, then shut. For once she had no script, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like the air in the room belonged to me. Karen showed up the next Saturday with Aaron in tow, holding a folder too thick to be casual. I watched them pull into the gravel drive from the front window, her in sunglasses like a magazine cover, him stepping out in loafers that probably cost more than Wyatt's monthly tuition. Hey, Dad, Karen called, waving as they approached the porch. Hope it's a good time to talk through some things. Depends on the things, I said, not moving from my chair. Aaron smiled like a man pitching a timeshare. Just a few ideas, Charles. Won't take long. We sat in the living room, sun coming through the windows Ruth had washed for 30 years straight. Karen laid out papers on the coffee table, while Aaron started in with a smooth, lawyerly tone. So, what we've prepared is a basic estate transfer framework, he said, sliding one document toward me. Totally standard, nothing binding yet. It just lets Karen manage the property in your name to reduce eventual probate hassles. Think of it as future-proofing. I looked down at the page. Why now? Because it's the smart thing to do, Karen jumped in. Dad, with your health the way it is, you don't want all this falling into chaos if, God forbid, something happens. This way, it stays in the family, we reduce taxes, and we avoid confusion. I don't see any confusion, I said. The house belongs to me. Aaron chuckled softly, like we were sharing a joke. Of course, of course. We just want to make sure we're all on the same page, legally. Karen leaned closer, voice softening. Aaron and I would cover the upkeep, the taxes, the big expenses. You could just enjoy your time. I looked past them toward the hallway, picturing Ruth's sewing basket still tucked under the coat rack. I'm not ready to sign anything, I said. Aaron nodded quickly. Totally understand. No pressure. But there was pressure. It sat in the air like a heavy quilt, and they both knew it. They stayed another hour shifting tactics, flattering, sympathizing, casually mentioning how hard it was to manage real estate across generations. When they finally left, Karen kissed my cheek and whispered, "Just think about it, okay?" I didn't say a word. That night, I sat at the kitchen table sipping weak tea, flipping slowly through their paperwork. Wyatt came in, dropping off a basket of squash from the garden. "You all right?" he asked, watching me stare at the folder. "They want me to sign the house over," I said. Wyatt frowned. "Why now?" I shrugged. "Maybe because I'm breathing slower." He didn't answer right away, just stood there, then finally said, "I heard them talking last week." In the yard. They didn't know I was on the other side of the garage. I looked up. They were saying if you won't go along with it, they'll get a competency evaluation. Try to prove you're not thinking straight. Said it'd be easier if they just handled it legally. I felt the breath leave me like a slow deflation. I closed the folder, suddenly tired beyond measure. The next morning, I asked Lorraine to stay for coffee after her visit. She watched me over the rim of her mug, saying nothing as I explained the documents, the visit, Wyatt's overheard conversation. "I need someone sharp," I said. "Someone who knows this kind of game." She nodded slowly. "I know someone, Miles Dorsey. Used to work probate in Clay County. Quiet guy. Keeps a low profile, but he's sharper than most lawyers I've met. Can he still practice? Number. But he still knows how to get things moving." I called him that afternoon. 3 days later, I sat at my dining table with Miles, white-haired, glasses perched low, voice slow but not soft. He read everything twice, then looked me in the eye and said, "You need 2 things, an updated will and a clean mental competency file. You can arrange that?" "I can." So I did. And that was the day I stopped hoping Karen's intentions were about love. Karen insisted on dinner for my birthday. "Something nice?" she said over the phone. "Just the 4 of us, me, Aaron, Wyatt, and you. A quiet celebration." I should have known better. We met at a steakhouse downtown, one of those polished places with dim lighting and waiters who pretended to know your name. I wore my best shirt, Ruth's favorite, a navy blue with thin white stripes, and used my good cane, the one with the carved handle. Wyatt drove. He didn't ask questions, just gave me a nod as we pulled up to valet. Karen greeted us in the lobby, all smiles and perfume. "Dad," she said, squeezing my arm, "you look sharp. Doesn't he look great, Aaron?" Aaron nodded, reaching for my coat like he suddenly remembered he was supposed to act like family. We were seated in a booth toward the back. Candlelight flickered. Napkins were folded like origami swans. We ordered drinks, talked about the weather, Wyatt's last class project, and how the town was finally repaving Jefferson Street. It was pleasant, suspiciously so. Then Karen set down her wine glass and shifted in her seat. "Dad," she began, "I know this isn't what you want to hear on your birthday, but I think we really need to revisit the conversation about the house." Wyatt's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. I wiped my lips with the napkin and said nothing. Karen smiled, too wide. "It's not about pushing you. It's about planning. You've worked hard your whole life. You deserve comfort, consistency, peace of mind." Aaron leaned forward. "We've looked at a few options, places with medical support built in. They're beautiful, not like you think. You'd have your own space, your own furniture. Wyatt could visit any time." "Not interested," I said. Karen blinked. Dad, come on, don't be stubborn. I'm not being stubborn. I'm answering your question. But what about when your breathing gets worse? She pressed. What about mobility? This isn't about control. This is about what's best. No, I said. It's about what's convenient. For you? The words hung in the air like smoke. Our waiter, poor kid, arrived with the main courses and set them down quickly, sensing the shift. Karen's voice sharpened. I am trying to protect you, but you're making it impossible. You want the house, I said plainly. You've wanted it for months. I've seen the way you look at the land, the corners, the plumbing. You're not worried about my comfort. You're counting square footage. Her face flushed, but she didn't back down. You don't know what you're saying, she snapped. You're not well, Dad. You're confused. You're being unreasonable and, frankly, irresponsible. Aaron sat up straighter. Maybe this isn't the place? No, Karen said, raising her voice. This is exactly the place. You want everyone to think you're still the brilliant architect, still in control, but you're not. You're sick and you're being selfish. People turned in their seats. The table next to us went silent. Wyatt pushed his plate aside and stood up. That's enough. Karen turned toward him, stunned. Wyatt? No, he said. You don't talk to him like that. He's not confused. He knows exactly what's going on, maybe too well. The waiter hovered, unsure if he should clear the plates. I reached for my cane and rose slowly, the room spinning just slightly from the effort. I'm leaving, I said, gripping the edge of the table for balance. Enjoy the meal. Wyatt followed me out into the cool night air, neither of us speaking until we got to the car. You okay? He asked. I nodded. I'm fine. But I wasn't. I was humiliated, and I was done. The next morning, I called Miles. Sell it, I said. The house, all of it, quietly, and update the will. To who? Someone who will plant in Ruth's garden. Someone who will honor what it was. And for the first time in a long time, I meant every word. I sold the house without telling a soul. Not Wyatt, not Lorraine, and certainly not Karen. It wasn't secrecy out of spite. It was necessity. After the steakhouse debacle, I knew the only way to move forward was to untangle myself completely from the roots that once held meaning, but now just held weight. Miles found a local realtor, someone he trusted, a woman named Annette, mid-50s, no nonsense, and more importantly, discreet. She walked through the place like she was visiting a chapel. She didn't make suggestions or talk about potential renovations. She looked at the garden and said, Someone loved this. I nodded. She did. Her name was Ruth. The buyers came from Kansas City, a young couple in their 30s with a toddler and another baby on the way. He was an art teacher. She ran an antique store. They asked if they could keep the garden beds and if the lilac bush by the porch had a story. I told them yes and yes. Ruth planted it in '77, same spring we put in the new windows. The offer came through 2 days later. Fair price, no conditions. I signed the papers before the ink had dried on the inspection report. By the end of the week, the house was no longer mine. I didn't cry. I thought maybe I would, but the truth is when the movers came and took my last few boxes, mostly books, some photo albums, Ruth's old quilt, I felt something strange and unfamiliar. Relief. I didn't leave a forwarding address for Karen. I did, however, send Wyatt a letter and a key. He came up the next day, barefoot on the back porch of the lakeside cottage I'd closed on quietly just north of town. It was nothing grand, just 2 bedrooms, 1 level, with a screened-in porch and a gentle slope down to the water. No stairs, no clutter, just peace. Wyatt stood in the doorway, taking it in. Wow, he said, stepping inside. This is... wow. I shrugged. It'll do. He ran a hand along the oak banister. You did this without telling anyone. Didn't think it was a group decision, I said. He smiled. Good. We sat outside for a while, watching the lake ripple in the late afternoon breeze. Birds skimmed the surface. Somewhere across the water, a kid laughed. I let the sun warm my face and didn't say much. I didn't have to. Later that week, Karen found out. Apparently, she showed up at the old farmhouse, furious and prepared to wage war. She let herself in, somehow still had a key, and stormed through the place only to find bare walls and strangers making dinner in her childhood kitchen. She called me 6 times in one day. I didn't answer. On the 7th try, I picked up. You sold it? She hissed, not even bothering with hello. You actually sold the house without telling me? I did. You have no right. I had every right, I cut in. It was mine. You've lost your mind. I didn't respond. This isn't over, she said. You can't just cut your family out like this. I didn't cut out my family, I said calmly. I cut out the people who acted like strangers. Silence. Then she switched gears. What about the will? It's been updated, she exhaled sharply. To what? Lorraine? That nurse? You think she actually cares about you? It's not Lorraine, I said. It's Wyatt. He's the only one who never asked me for anything but time. You'll regret this, she said, voice trembling now. You've made a huge mistake. No, I said, watching the lake roll softly against the bank. For the first time, I think I finally haven't. Then I hung up, and the only thing I felt was quiet. Blessed, earned quiet. Lorraine moved in on a Thursday. It started as a trial run, 2 weeks, she said, just to ease the drive and give us both a little breathing room. I didn't argue. Truth was, the quiet didn't feel the same anymore. Not bad, just thin, like soup without salt. She brought 2 duffel bags and a small radio that only played old jazz standards. No clutter, no perfume. She made coffee strong, folded laundry without being asked, and never hovered. We settled into a rhythm by the second day. Me on the porch with a book or dozing, her in the kitchen humming something low while she wiped down counters that weren't dirty. In the evenings, we'd sit by the lake, no need for talk. The silence between us wasn't empty. It was shared. By the end of the first week, she was still there. By the second, she had a drawer in the hallway for her things. Neither of us mentioned it. Then came the letter. Karen didn't call. She knew better now. Instead, a certified envelope showed up with my name typed neatly across the front. Lorraine brought it in with the mail and laid it on the kitchen table without saying a word. Inside was a printed letter and a complaint form. Allegations of elder abuse, financial coercion, manipulation by a live-in caregiver. I let out a bitter laugh. She thinks you're running some sort of scam. Lorraine raised an eyebrow. Well, if I am, I'm doing a lousy job. Your checkbook's still in your sock drawer. I didn't say anything for a while, just sat there, turning the letter in my hands like it might reveal something new if I stared long enough. You want me to leave? She asked softly. No, I said. I want you to stay right where you are. Later that afternoon, Sheriff Denning came by. He was decent enough, a big man with a calm voice and a badge that looked like it hadn't seen action in years. He stood on my porch and removed his hat like we were starting a conversation from the 1950s. Got a report about possible misconduct, he said gently. Lorraine stepped aside. Come in, Sheriff. The kettle's still hot. He walked through the place slow, polite, eyes scanning, but not prying. I showed him the documents Miles helped me prepare. My mental competency letter, notarized will. A clear paper trail that showed every decision I'd made was mine. After half an hour, he set his folder down and looked at me across the coffee table. Well, he said, scratching his chin, you seem sharp as ever. And unless you've got a basement full of secrets, I don't see any abuse here. Not unless strong tea and honesty count, I said. He smiled faintly. You want me to file a response? No need, I said. She'll get the message loud and clear when it comes back unsigned. He nodded and stood. Good day, Mr. Wilcox, Ms. Briggs. As the door shut behind him, Lorraine glanced my way. I'd still want me to stay? I looked around the room, the lake glittering behind her through the window, and gave the only answer that made sense. I haven't breathed this easy in years. And I meant it. It was a warm Sunday afternoon when they came. I saw the silver Lexus pull up the gravel drive before I heard it, smooth, polished, full of pretense. Karen stepped out first, sunglasses on, blouse starched, lips tight. Aaron followed a beat later, holding a folder like it contained the Constitution. They didn't look like family. They looked like lawyers coming to deliver bad news. Lorraine glanced at me from the porch swing, a paperback folded over her knee. You want me inside? No, I said. Let them see we don't hide. Karen didn't waste time on pleasantries. She climbed the porch steps and got right to it. We're here to offer you a resolution, Dad, she said. Something fair. I leaned my cane against the railing and stood slowly. Let's hear it. Aaron opened the folder. If you agree to revise your will, restore the previous version with equal shares to Karen and Wyatt, we'll drop the challenge. No court filings, no public disputes. Karen added, you keep the house, we walk away clean, no more drama. No more drama, I repeated, raising an eyebrow. You mean no more of you calling the sheriff or sending accusations in the mail? Karen's mouth twitched. We thought this was better than a lawsuit. I glanced at Lorraine. She was calm, unreadable, just like she always was when Karen's name came up. And what do I get in return? I asked. Aaron blinked. The end of conflict. I stepped forward. There's already been an end. You just didn't recognize it. Karen's smile faltered. Dad, you're not thinking straight. She's manipulated you. Stop, I said, my voice sharper than I intended. You lost the right to call this manipulation the day you turned my illness into a bargaining chip. Aaron shifted uncomfortably. Charles, we don't want to escalate. You already did, I said, cutting him off. You threatened to drag me into court. You filed a complaint with the sheriff. And you're standing on my porch now, not out of love, but because you finally realized I'm not budging. Karen's jaw tightened. Wyatt's a child. He has no idea how to manage. He knows how to plant a seed and wait for it to grow, I said. He knows how to listen without scheming. That's more than I can say for either of you. Aaron opened his mouth again, but I raised a hand. I had a mental capacity exam. It's notarized and filed. You won't win in court. Karen crossed her arms. So that's it? You're just cutting me out? You cut yourself out, I said quietly. I just stopped pretending otherwise. She stared at me for a long second. The hurt was real, but not the kind that comes from loss. It was the pain of losing control. If you walk away from this deal, she said, voice low, don't expect me to come back. I nodded. I don't. Aaron stepped forward. You'll regret this. I looked out past them, over the lake, where the wind caught the edge of the water like a page being turned. No, I said. I've regretted plenty, but this is the beginning of peace. They left in silence, footsteps thudding hollow against the porch boards. Back inside, Lorraine put the kettle on without a word. I sat down at the table, my breath heavy but steady. The air in the room was quiet, and finally, so was I. It was late October when the call came. Wyatt answered, not me. I was dozing on the porch, wrapped in a flannel blanket, the lake turning that soft gray it gets before the first frost. He came outside, phone still in his hand, and sat on the steps. I could tell something was off. It's Karen, he said quietly. Car accident. She's okay, but she's in the hospital. Busted ribs, broken leg. Pretty bad. I looked at him, and for a moment, I didn't feel anything. Just the breeze on my face and the faint smell of wood smoke from somewhere down the lake. She asked for me? I finally asked. He hesitated. Number. But I think she didn't say not to either. I nodded once. That was enough. Lorraine didn't try to talk me out of it. She just packed me a thermos of tea and a pill case with a note taped to it. Don't forget the blue one at 3 p.m. The hospital was 40 minutes away. Wyatt drove. Karen was in room 208. I knocked softly, then stepped in before she could answer. She was propped up in the bed, hair pulled back, eyes tired. Her leg was in a cast, and a fresh line of stitches ran just below her collarbone. There was a book open on her lap, but she wasn't reading it. When she saw me, her expression didn't change. Not anger, not surprise, just stillness. I heard, I said. Wyatt told me. She nodded. I'm fine. You don't look fine. I've looked worse, she said. Apparently airbags don't care if you're wearing designer. There was a long pause. I moved to the chair by the window and sat down slowly, letting the silence do what it needed to. After a few minutes, she spoke again. I don't expect anything, she said flatly. Not forgiveness, not understanding. You came. That's enough. I studied her face. The pride was still there, but chipped. Something had shifted. I could see it in her eyes, like she just started realizing the weight of things she couldn't carry anymore. I'm not here to fix anything, I said quietly. I just figured I should look you in the eye, remind you I'm still here. Karen looked away, blinking slowly. I was wrong about a lot of things. That's not an apology. It's the best I can do. I nodded. Then I'll take it for what it is. She closed her eyes for a second. Is Wyatt mad? No, I said. But he's watching. That boy sees more than you think. She gave the faintest smile. Just like Mom used to. I didn't respond to that. Instead, I stood slowly, adjusted my coat, and placed the thermos on her tray table. Tea, I said. Better than hospital coffee. Thanks, she said. As I left the room, I didn't feel reconciled, but I felt something else. Maybe not forgiveness, maybe not healing, but a small human moment. And for me, that was enough. A year had passed since I left the farmhouse behind. The lake had thawed, frozen, and thawed again. Spring was here now, early sun glinting off the water, the trees wearing their first green like fresh linen. I sat on the porch wrapped in Ruth's old cardigan, breathing slow through the tube clipped under my nose. The emphysema was worse than it had been a year ago. No surprise there. Dr. Sanford had warned me what to expect, and he hadn't been wrong. The walks were shorter now, the naps longer. Some days, even standing felt like lifting bricks. But I wasn't angry about it. I had made peace with my body's pace. It was the rest of it I'd needed to get right. And I had. Lorraine came out with a glass of water and one of her awful morning smoothies, something green and suspicious. I gave her a look. "Don't start," she said, setting it on the porch rail. "You promised." "Promises made under duress don't count." She smirked. "Drink half, and I'll let you skip the stretching." I took a sip. It tasted like lawn clippings, but I drank it anyway. Inside, my memoir manuscript sat in a folder on the desk, neatly typed, carefully edited by Lorraine over long winter evenings. Wyatt helped organize the photos. I wasn't trying to get published. I just wanted Ruth's stories, my stories, our stories down on paper before time took them from me. Wyatt still came by most weekends. He helped me build a new raised bed last fall. Now it sat full of soil and tiny green sprouts, tomatoes, basil, peppers. He promised to keep them going, even after I was gone. Karen hadn't called since the hospital visit. Wyatt said she was back in Chicago, working too much, still bitter. He didn't say more, and I didn't ask. We'd had our moment. I didn't need another. Regret didn't erase what came before it. Sometimes it just softened the edge. I heard the screen door creak behind me. Lorraine stepped out again with a folded blanket. "You're stubborn," she said, laying it over my legs. "But you're colder than you think." I smiled. "You've been here a year. That's long enough to know I don't change easy." "No," she said, pulling up a chair beside me. "But you chose peace. That's something." We sat like that for a long time, just watching the lake and the light move across it. I thought about everything I'd given up, the house, the legacy Karen thought she was owed, the old pride I used to wear like armor, and what I'd gained in return, a garden. Quiet. The sound of water lapping against the shore, a nurse who became a friend, a grandson who showed up every time it mattered. I let out a slow breath. Peace, I thought. That's what I'd built in the end. Not a legacy of things, a legacy of choice, of clarity, and I wouldn't trade it for anything.